Hi there, it's Mrs F, and this is my video on the reasons for, events and consequences of the Munich Putsch. Although I'm following the Edexcel specification, you'll find a lot of the content is also relevant to other exam boards. So, last time we had a look at the early development of the Nazi Party, and in the next two lessons we're looking at the Munich Putsch and the lean years. So this lesson is focusing on the Munich Putsch itself. In November 1923, Hitler launched the Munich Putsch, which is sometimes also called the Beer Hall Putsch. It was an armed revolt intended to overthrow the Weimar Republic. But it didn't just happen out of nowhere. It was the result of long, medium and short-term causes. So looking at the longer-term causes, between 1918 and 1923, a long list of grievances had been building up towards the Weimar Republic. There was the armistice, the belief that Germany had been stabbed in the back. There was the shameful terms of the Treaty of Versailles. And all of this helped create support for nationalist parties like the Nazis. As we saw last lesson, the Nazis had been busy building support in Munich, in Bavaria. The Bavarian state government leaders themselves were no fans of the Weimar government. They shared similar views to the Nazis and turned a blind eye to the violence of the SA. By 1923, the Nazis had 50,000 members, a far cry from that very small party that Hitler had joined in 1919. If we look at the medium-term causes, we need to focus on the inspiration provided by Mussolini. He led a group called the Fascists in Italy, and the Nazis modelled their salute and the use of flags from what they had seen Mussolini do. In 1922, Mussolini led his paramilitary forces in a march on Rome and forced the democratic government of Italy to accept him as their new leader, and this of course provided inspiration for the Nazis. Then we have the short-term causes that we've also looked at in previous lessons. First of all, there was the invasion of the Ruhr in January 1923, which of course made the German government look very weak. Then, during the course of 1923, hyperinflation got worse and worse. Buying everyday goods had become almost impossible, and the Nazis felt like they could capitalise on the discontent caused by hyperinflation. Now, as I've already said, the Bavarian state government were no fans of the Weimar government, and so Hitler plotted with the head of the Bavarian government, von Kahr, the head of the Bavarian police, von Seisser, and the head of the German army in Bavaria, von Lossow, to take over Munich. But then on the 4th of October, they called off the rebellion, which completely infuriated Hitler. He had 3,000 troops ready to fight, and he was worried that if he didn't take action, they would think that he was all talk and not a man of action. So, on the evening of the 8th of November 1923, the three Bavarian government officials were meeting in a beer hall in Munich. Hitler burst in, supported by 600 members of the SA. Brandishing a revolver, he shot it into the ceiling and declared that he was taking over the state of Bavaria, and from there he would march on Berlin and overthrow the Weimar Republic. Alongside him was General Ludendorff, and he promised that Ludendorff would become the leader of the German army. At gunpoint, Hitler demanded that Kahr, Seisser and Lossow would support him. Overpowered by Hitler and Ludendorff, they reluctantly shook hands in agreement. Meanwhile, Röhm and the SA took over the local police and army headquarters. Crucially, however, The main army barracks remained in the hands of army officers who were loyal to the government. Hearing news of this, Hitler left the beer hall, and whilst he was elsewhere, Kahr, Seisser and Lossow pleaded with Ludendorff to let them go, saying that their wives would be suspicious. And so Ludendorff, taking the men at their word, released them. They promised that they would come back the next morning. But by 5 a.m. the next morning, as Hitler and his supporters gathered to launch their attack on the streets of Munich, it became clear that the Free Bavarian leaders had withdrawn their support and had decided to put down any uprising. Now Hitler hesitated. But at midday, I can't speak today, he decided to continue with the revolt. Together, Hitler, Ludendorff, Goering, Röhm, Streicher, all people that we looked at last lesson, and of course their followers, marched on the town centre to declare Hitler the President of Germany. Hitler thought that there would be support amongst local people and officials, but he was to be disappointed. The townspeople were indifferent and the army stayed loyal to the state government. Hitler, with only 2,000 rifles, was outgunned. Hitler and Ludendorff, who were both ex-soldiers, led a group of Hitler's shock troops to the main square, where they were met by the state police. According to police reports, the rebels pressed pistols into the policemen's chests, spat on them, and pointed bayonets in their direction. Then someone, and it's not really clear which side, opened fire. A bodyguard threw himself in front of Hitler and was wounded by 6 bullets. Goering was shot in the thigh. Hitler was dragged to the ground by his bodyguards with such force that his arm was dislocated. In moments, 14 of Hitler's supporters and 4 policemen were shot dead. And at this point, the rebellion descended into chaos. Most of the rebels scrambled for refuge. Ludendorff, Röhm and Streicher were all arrested. Goering managed to go into hiding abroad. Hitler fled the scene and hid for 2 days, but was later arrested. So, in the short term, the Munich Putsch was most definitely a failure. It was an embarrassing defeat and humiliation. Hitler was put on trial for high treason and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. As a result of this, the Nazi Party was banned, and Hitler was prevented from speaking in public until 1927. But actually, we could say that in the long term, it was actually a success. Prior to the Munich Putsch, the Nazis were very much a regional party, only really known in Bavaria. But Hitler was able to use the trial to get national publicity. He was in the newspapers every single day, and he was allowed to wear his Iron Cross and address the court for hours on end. We can also see that the Munich Putsch showed that the judiciary in the Weimar Republic was also very sympathetic to right-wing parties like the Nazis. Hitler was put in a very comfortable prison. I mean, just look at that picture on the bottom of the screen. It looks pretty cushy, doesn't it? And he was actually released after only 9 months. Just compare that with what happened to the Spartakists. They didn't even get a trial. They were literally assassinated. Hitler was also able to use his time in prison to write Mein Kampf. He dictated it to Rudolf Hess, who is also in that picture that you see at the bottom. And the other reason why the Munich Putsch was important is because Hitler finally realised he needed a new strategy to gain power. His violent uprising had failed. Instead, he needed to build a party with nationwide support and use democracy, which he hated, to win power. as Hitler said he was going to need to hold his nose and enter the Reichstag. And that's what we're going to start looking at next lesson, what changes Hitler made to make the Nazis more electable. As well as looking at the changes that Hitler made to the Nazi Party, we'll also be considering next time the reasons why they had limited support between 1924 and 1928. So hopefully I'll catch you next week when you check out my next video.